And welcome to the Drawing Board. I'm Rob Howard. It's just going to be me today. No Patrick, no Kip, because this is a little bit of a weird time for them. It's actually noon right now, so it's not a time where they can usually make it. And plus, I have a lot of other people with me, more people than I usually have. It's usually just one other person. Now I have three other people here. And so what are we doing? We're going to be talking about a game, an indie game. Actually, it's a Purdue Senior Capstone project that happens to be an indie game, and it's something that I advised throughout the semester in the spring of 2021, also the fall of 2020 as well. And that game is called Sonata Theory. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get into that, oh yes, I have to do this. I have to do this obligatory stuff. Yes, you should, if you enjoy this, you should definitely give us that good review on iTunes or Google or whatever it is that you listen to this on. You should definitely click like on the YouTube video that gets pumped out. You should do all of those things. Why do I say that? Because it helps us in the algorithm, right? Like to show up when people search for cool podcasts. If there's a podcast and only has one review, it doesn't matter how good it is. It'll just get buried under all of the ones that are like famous and such. So if you want us to do well, you should definitely give us a positive review, and subscribe to it and like and all of those things. That is gold. That is like gold. And as always, if you have a question or comment for me, rthoward, the number 2, at gmail.com, or Rojo Games on Twitter, or Rojo Games 80 on Instagram. I'm on all of those things. So with that out of the way, let's get into the drawing board this time with Studio MAYJ, or MAYJ Studios. Either one of those will work, I guess. So let me introduce the team, both the team that is present with us today and the rest of the team that couldn't make it. So we have with us Emily Hill, the lead designer of the game. Say hello to, honestly, my parents and about 20 other people, but the world, I guess. Say hello.
Hello.
All right. And Isabelle Pacis, who, along with Braz Bradford, are the 2D artists on the project. And we'll get into more later because there's an interesting sort of 3D and 2D combo thing that this game did. So say hello, Isabelle.
Hey, everyone.
And we also have Isaiah Eleazar, the producer of the game, and you're muted right now. So if you want to say hi, you can't. I can see, and we're just using Discord chat to record this. So Isaiah, say hi. You're unmuted.
Hey guys.
All right, so and then also to round out the team, we also have Devon Wilson, who is the art director. Also did a lot of wonderful 2D art, also for some of the cinematic content of the game. Did the awesome kind of promo hype poster that I asked for early in the fall, which really looks cool. It's also like the title screen image. And there was also Sophia, who was QA on the project. She's an incoming Purdue freshman, actually, so that was really exciting to work with a really talented high school student that is going to be in the Purdue program. So that was really cool. And also Mose, who's a grad student at Purdue, was our audio producer, who helped us with audio assets. And I should say, my audio class, if they happen to listen to this, they're in the credits. I'm not going to remember their names necessarily, but they are in the credits. So you play the game, you will see who they are. They provided a lot of the sound effects for the game as well. So, and we try to do that at Purdue, where we have kind of cross-disciplinary things like that, where a certain class might provide assets to a project. So that's really fun and cool. So here's what I want to do now, team. I want you to discuss, or introduce rather, Sonata Theory to my audience. So any of you can do this. So whoever wants to, just give your little pitch for what Sonata Theory the game is. Perhaps Emily should do this. You are, or Emily or Isaiah probably. You
Emily.
Usually do this in the various presentations. Isaiah, it looks like you were gonna go ahead and fill us in.
Yeah, and I could pass it off to Emily to introduce other parts. But yeah, what this game is basically you play as Cadence, this quirky, musically inclined individual who finds herself in the alternate universe. In this alternate universe that we're referring to as the falsetto, and this falsetto is characterized by a lot of bioluminescent plants, a lot of bright colors, a lot of very interesting and goofy characters, and basically just a more lively and playful version of the real world. And you, as playing as Cadence, is your job to sort of explore the falsetto, as well as explore why you're here, meet all the people, and go on this Undertale-esque adventure. And I could go ahead and pass it off to Emily to speak about the actual mechanics on what the gameplay entails.
Yeah, so Sonata Theory just follows this character named Cadence, and she goes through this magical portal, as you do to the start of any adventure. Finds herself in the falsetto, which is very, very beautifully done. Again, a lot of that is credited to the art direction of Devon, who isn't present here today, but has been working with our art team and myself a lot on getting these concepts together. So we knew we wanted a really, really beautiful game, but not too heavy on mechanics and stuff. We originally wanted to make like a visual novel or something of the sort, but we then decided to expand to having this nice environment that you can explore, this apartment that Cadence lives in. You get to see the real world version and the falsetto version as well. And the whole plot of the game is you encounter this dude named Sonata, and he's very sick. You need to find a cure for him. And he's like, you're the only one that I think can do this. So will you help me out? You of course accept, and how you progress through the game is you have a magic meter. By playing music and playing different spells, you can use this magic to your heart's content, but you are kind of warned throughout the game that there may be consequences if you solve puzzles by just playing a magic spell rather than getting to know your neighbors and thinking about it and making trades for items and such. So you can progress by exploration, or you can progress via spell use. And which way you decide to progress can affect the outcome of the game. So we wanted to make it very interactive friendly towards the player and feel like you have a choice in shaping the world that you're playing in.
Awesome. And, I think one of the things I find interesting about this game that I'll mention to my audience is, it's funny when a game is made that I feel has like this strong influence from previous games that possibly the team hasn't actually encountered, but it just so happens that the things that you're making resemble, certain games that I've played in the past very well. And what I mean by that is, you mentioned, Emily, the visual novel component. So there's kind of a range of visual novel levels of interactivity, right? On the one extreme end, you sort of have games and of course, I'm going to mention a bunch of Japanese games here because that's what I do. Like the Jake Hunter series, which is like pure visual novel. Like it's just dialogue choices. It's very little other than that. And then kind of on the other end, you have like the high production sort of very gamified things like Heavy Rain or Beyond Two Souls, which kind of is about a narrative, but it's the production values are kind of beyond what would be kind of a typical visual novel. And what you all did with Sonata Theory, I'd put in the middle of those two, right? Where it's like there is definitely, I think, a good amount of gameplay that happens that isn't just a dialogue. Like you run around, you find items. There's sort of some environmental puzzle solving that you do. You can freely navigate the world, so it isn't just kind of static scenes where dialogue sort of things play out. So you do actually explore the world, and the company and the type of games that Sonata Theory always reminded me of the most would be games like Hotel Dusk and games like Trace Memory and so on. And these games were made by a company called Sing, C-I-N-G, in Japan. And they did a lot of these games that were kind of had roots in visual novels, but always kind of went a step beyond that. And Sonata Theory reminds me an awful lot of that. And actually, Hotel Dusk is probably a top 10 all-time game for me. I loved Hotel Dusk. And really, Sonata Theory probably most resembles Hotel Dusk. Not necessarily in visuals, because Hotel Dusk is mostly black and white, and it's like a detective noir thing, versus Sonata Theory, which is very colorful and rich. But where it aligns very close is in both those games, you are navigating a building, with hallways and rooms, that's kind of architected in a similar way. And obviously in Hotel Dusk, it's a hotel. In your game, it's like a Brooklyn type apartment complex, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, and so it's very similar, which really hits my gaming heartstrings, like right in, because I love those games that Sing used to make. They went out of business in 2010, RIP Sing. But they did a lot of really cool games like that. All right, so we'll talk more about the game kind of in the open discussion that we'll have later, but I wanted to jump right into the actual post-mortem. So this is the first time on my podcast where I've done a post-mortem. So for anyone listening that doesn't know what those are, it's basically just this style of discussion that you have where you say, okay, here's a game project that I did, and here's what went right about it and what went wrong. And it's surprisingly hard to say three things that start with a W at the consecutively like that. So that's kind of what a postmortem is. You're just looking at a project that you've completed, and you're trying to kind of see what sort of the positives and the negatives, so you can carry it on to future game development efforts. So that's what a postmortem is, and they're also very interesting to read and whatever. So with Sonata Theory, let's start with what went right. And so what I want kind of each of you to do is think about, and I have my own ideas about what some of these things are. So anyone want to chime in right now and things that went well in this production?
I think I can go ahead and start to say that I think that a big thing that went really well was the art style and the art direction. Of course, led by Devon, our art director. I think that to say that the art style went well is, me considering how all of the assets, the environments started to tie together, um, and how we sort of created specifically the falsetto world from sort of this general idea of the real world, but bioluminescent, glowy, magical plants, and for some reason, I'd say all of the artists and everyone on the team really could picture what it looked like. And thanks to some environment concepts by Devon, actually, he sort of set this color scheme through an environment painting that tied it all together, I'd say. And I don't know if anyone else thinks the same, but I think that it was a nice image in my head, and I think that was shown through everyone else's work.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, because I'll just comment that one of the challenges that you all had, and I tried to help you with as best I could as your advisor, is that there's sort of these game development disciplines, right, in these Purdue senior capstone teams, and this is one of those things I'm trying to make better, boiler up and all that, you don't always get to have like a balanced team, right? Like this team was really strong in like 2D art, really strong in design and level design and production, but there wasn't like a dedicated environment artist. And so the art direction had to be really good, because we were going to find asset packs on the store, in the Unreal Store, kind of freely available, or, sometimes not free, but, just available assets, and to achieve an art style that actually looks cogent, whilst not having someone that's just going to be in a 3D modeling program cranking that out for you, I think was really good. Emily, I think you had something to say as well.
I was actually just going to tag on to what Isabelle said and kind of broaden it to, I think our entire pre-production went like unusually well. We had been planning on doing a project together as a group, especially like the three of us have been friends throughout all of college, so we knew we'd end up here at some point. And we had all that time to think about it, but the first day of the semester, when it came time to think about making an indie game, we kind of spaced on ideas initially, but we had a really good brainstorming session, and we combined a lot of good ideas. The big thing being, I've only done level design and really specialized and felt the strongest in my level design in 3D environments. And then we have this team full of really great artists that are especially great at doing 2D asset creation. So the question was, how do we combine that so that all of this stuff comes out really, really cool? And we were also fortunate to have a producer on the team, Isaiah, that could help guide us in the right direction once we found the direction we wanted to go in. So we got off the ground running with a great concept. We made like a prototype within the first month of pre-production, and then we polished that prototype to turn it into a demo for our game a couple months later and started showing it off before we even entered production. And I think that was just a really, really good thing, because I don't think we would be finishing this game up right now had we not had such a solid start in pre-production.
I agree totally about the pre-pro, and one thing that you mentioned is having that demo done in the fall. So kind of how Purdue capstones work for the audience's benefit here is that, at least how they work right now, we're always changing things, is the students get 2 semesters to make their game. So they get kind of the fall semester as a pre-pro period, pre-production period, and then the spring semester is basically the production period. Now, we're already expanding that, where they're going to get, at least a semester in the previous year, but that's not something this team could have benefited from. So one thing I intentionally did, and I'm going to go ahead and pat myself on the back here for good leadership and all of that. And I would say, if people are curious, an advisor, I'm basically an executive producer, except I'm not going to like stomp on their creativity like maybe an executive producer might do in the industry. I'm not going to be like, well, my Venn diagram says that visual novels aren't going to sell, and so therefore you should do a first-person shooter set in World War II. I'm not going to do that. But one thing I did do, though, is I said, okay, here's this local event, Indie Indies, that's put on by IUPUI, which is another college, another very good college to the south of us, in the Indianapolis area. And I said, hey, let's submit the game to that. And that was kind of the rallying cry, the rally point, if you will, for the demo, was to have something ready for that. And I thought that worked really, really well. So Isaiah, I know you were unmuting your mic, so maybe you had something you wanted to chime in with as well. And if not, we can open the floor to others. Oh, yes, there you go. Your mic is unmuted again.
Yeah, I actually was going to mention the Indie Indies. I think the Indie Indies went really well. And I think, like what Emily and Isabelle said, the whole pre-production process went extremely well. It's very rare that by the end of pre-production that everyone on the team has a clear sort of view of what the game should look like by the end of it. And I think that we did a good job of establishing that direction, as well as setting that milestone that you actually set for us, Rob, with the Indie Indies. That actually pushed us to sort of chase and capture this vision that we were going for. And I think that especially with our final product, that we definitely hit that mark that we wanted to hit in terms of like appealing visual style. And despite the heavy 2D art and lack of a 3D artist, we were still able to sort of establish that art style and make it look like the way we wanted to, even though we had a sort of a lack of balance in the 2D and 3D art side. So I think we did that very well.
You totally agree, and I think that was something really useful that I'm going to try to recreate for every capstone team I advise, is having some early goal. Because even though, let's face it, a year, and it's not even a year, it's like 8 months basically that you get to make a capstone game, at least in the official capstone class structure. That's not a lot of time, but it feels like a lot of time when you're starting. And so to have kind of a midway point, rally point, if you will, that you work towards, I think is actually really really cool. So I'm going to add something to the what went well or what went right. I'm amused by how hard it is for me to say those words, now that I'm podcasting, those W words. And again, tuning my own horn just a little bit here. I thought the music went well, and why do I care about that? Well, for a couple of different reasons. One, music's a massive part of the game. You might get the sense of that from Sonata Theory, from the character names in the game. So music is integral to the plot. So we needed good music, and who was going to do that? Well, I was going to do that. Actually, I'll admit, I kind of jumped on that. I was like, hey, you need music. This is a great excuse to essentially claim I'm getting paid to write music, which is always like it's been a rare thing in my career. But whenever I can say, hey, I'm writing music and it's for my job, in air quotes, I always jump on that immediately. But it was also a lot of fun, and I'll say that one of the things that made that work so well, because I can't recall a single instance, and this never happens. This never ever happens, where I write music for a game. And usually when I've done that in the past, in my industry career, when I've written music, there'll be like 1,000 revisions that whoever the client is would want. So, this was all when I was working at MAYJ Studios. I would write some music. They're like, okay, that's cool, but what if it was, if I turned in like a classical piece, they'd be like, and obviously I'm exaggerating a little, but they'd be like, okay, that classical piece is cool, but what if it were techno? And what if it were double the beats per minute? And what if there was a vocal on it, right? Like, and usually that's what happens. You go back and forth, and you revise. I would submit music, and Emily would just be like, this sounds great. This sounds great. This sounds great, right? And it got a little addictive, actually. It caused me to write more music than I was ever intending. I was basically intending to write the theme tune and the variation, because it's one of those split world games where there's like world A, world B, that kind of duality sort of thing. And so we needed at minimum kind of theme for real world, theme for falsetto world. But I was so pleased with how much you liked the music that I just kept making music. And now if you go to my Spotify account, so that's just Rob Howard on Spotify. You'll see that. You'll see the Sonata Theory soundtrack there, that you can listen to. And so I was really happy with that, and I thought that helped the game, and it was really fun for me to be able to do that. So hopefully you all agree that that was something that went well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also sort of like, comes back to, all of us being, or most of us being quite artistic people. And I just feel like when I first started hearing the music that you were producing, like it just very much fit into the world that was being built. And I think that definitely something I wanted to bring up that went well is how well the world came out because of how well we could build off of each other. I think that, came like a character concept art, then there's the environment, assets being put together, and the music. I feel like with every step of the way, anything new that was created had such a good base to start off with. And I think that was something that was going on, I think, with the music as well.
And Emily, you actually were the person that was giving me direction on the music. So you're sort of responsible for the style and everything. So if you could maybe just since we're talking about it anyway, take a moment to explain kind of what the music of the game is like.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that I was the direction. Because this all started, like, during early pre-production. We knew we wanted music right from the get-go. And we knew Rob was, like, begging us to let him make the music. And we're like, no problem. But the direction we settled on was basically the jazz. I'm pretty sure I was like, I like jazz. I'm like, does everyone else like jazz? And the consensus was either yes or I haven't heard enough jazz to really figure out. So I was like, oh boy, let's change that. But of course, I knew right away having the two different worlds meant two similar but different music styles. I did not want the same track to play in like the same type of area, even if it's different worlds. I didn't want it to feel the exact same and just copy pasted, because it takes away from the individuality that our artists have put into making different character sprites for each world and having different assets for each world. So we knew music had to be different. What ended up happening for the direction of that, I think, is falsetto we settled on kind of first as being more the cool jazz, being a little bit more lo-fi, a little bit more synth integrated into it. And then for the real world, we're like, well, let's make it a little more laid back, a little bit classical, maybe just some light piano, arpeggios, maybe a harp in the background. In fact, the main themes for the instruments throughout the game are kind of a flute sound and then like a synthetic kind of piano sound with a lot of arpeggios, and that's because those are the instruments that we associate with the two main characters. So that was kind of all the notes and directions that I gave out to Rob, and I'm like, I don't know if that makes any sense, but this is what I'm really feeling looking at. I think there was some concept art coming out for the environment around that time, so I was like, this is what I hear when I look at this picture. Is there any way that makes sense so that we can have a soundtrack that resembles that? And I think the first song that you put out, Rob, was like the main theme for the game, because
Yes.
it has both parts of the falsetto and the real world in it, so it kind of combines those two themes, and it has the main instruments as the theme. And that's, I think, the perfect track to encompass what our game is all about. I know I fell in love with it, and I think everybody else on the team did as well.
Yeah, and it was so much fun to do, and really for me it was like when you mentioned, hey, like, I think that jazz should be a major. Of course, that's going to like ring all the bells for me, right? Because jazz is kind of my home base musical style. It's what I studied as, an undergraduate, and I still consider myself a jazz practitioner of some sort. So that was such an easy sell. That's one of the reasons why I was begging to do it, because I'm just like, this is great. This is exactly what I would like, to make, regardless, and I think what I like the most about it is I can, it's very, very listenable. I always have this test with music where obviously not all music that's good works well for this, but if I can jog with the music on and it's enjoyable while jogging, that's like a massive win, and it's totally a good jogging soundtrack to listen to. So yeah, we are sort of all on the same page, but because I know we only have about 8 minutes or so of Isaiah's time left, I wanted to jump to the what went wrong portion. And Isaiah, I'll just open up with you, especially because you are the producer, so you're going to have a handle on kind of the workflow. So in this production, what do you think went maybe not so great?
Yeah, so like I said before in the went well section, it went really well when we established our art direction and established sort of pursued that art direction. But also, because we are a team heavy of artists, we do not have any dedicated programmers. So what ended up happening as a result of that was that towards the end of the project, when all of the art assets were completed and the art team was starting to wind down, we had Emily, our designer, sort of quarterbacking the tail end of the project, pretty much making sure getting all of the remaining mechanics in, making sure all of the events are properly scripted, and then making sure get those builds out on time. And I know that definitely took a toll on basically just the mental health of the team, because we didn't have that dedicated person for programming. We went ahead and like just put it on the person who knew Unreal the best. And I think that there was an issue in acquiring additional support. I mean, there were definitely some successes as well as like acquiring the support from you in the audio class for music and sound effects. But there was also, we weren't able to acquire a programmer, 3D modeler, or a dedicated animator, and we had to sort of make do with what we had. And I think in terms of what didn't go well. It's just that balance of team members has both its pros and cons, because towards the end it got a little rough because poor Emily here was pulling all-nighters nearly every night trying to get the next build up, and I think that time.
Oh, looks
sure
like
that all.
Oh, there you go. We just
required
lost you for a
disciplines are
second.
covered.
We just lost you for a second, but it was just for a second. So just you were talking about Emily and her all-nighters.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's a result of what happens like when it doesn't have the.
Oh no, Isaiah's
Making sure.
connection is kind of going in and out here.
I can hear him.
Okay,
Rob.
yeah, it's coming in a little bit, and of course, we're being recorded on my end, so it's coming in not so well for me. So actually, here's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and I'll circle back to that. I think you were basically through your point anyway, Isaiah.
Yeah, I was wrapping it up.
Okay, and now you're back. Now you're back. For me, it was like cutting out a little bit. So yes, I totally agree. It's and we've already kind of mentioned this before, but the kind of team member imbalance with disciplines definitely caused some funky workflow issues. So any other and this could come from anyone, things that didn't go so well in this project?
Yeah, I guess to pop on into the as the one that kind of suffered here at the end. Yeah, it was rough because the start of the project was very much this feeling of I'm making a game with all of my best friends. Nothing can go wrong, especially because pre-production was just so fun. We had so much fun coming up with ideas. I even made a prototype. I think the first version of that prototype I finished in like a week or even less. I was just like, hey guys, I made a little game that I think could be inspiration for our game, just out of nowhere. I was so excited. But yeah, I'm listed as the scripter on the game. I've done most of the scripting, but I still don't feel like a scripter and certainly not a mechanics person. So when it came down to, okay, how are we going to get these mechanics done, it did fall on me. And it was a lot of work to the point that I think some of my early game design ideas for the project kind of fell through because I was no longer able to focus on being solely the game designer. I had to put on this other hat and kind of leave a bunch of ideas in the dust. I think I scoped down properly enough, and with the help of the whole team, I think we were able to come in and kind of fill the gaps artistically on stuff that we scoped down on. But it is rough when you it's both the strength of our team that we're all so artistic, but it's also the weakness when it comes down to the fact that we are making a video game and we don't have someone with a little bit more programming knowledge on the team. And I think another thing that went wrong is Burnout because of this. Because we didn't have like mechanic stuff put in place, we decided, oh, we'll make up for that with more art assets. But that ended up putting a lot more on the art team as well. So there was a point in the middle of production where I think we were all really, really burnt out, and it would be like someone would ask for help and it's like, well, I don't have the time on my plate to help them. No one did. So it's just everybody kind of struggling on their own for a bit. But I will say props to Isaiah, because I think this is the good thing about having a producer on your team is I know there were times I was able to reach out to him and be like, hey, you're the producer, man. I have something I need to talk to you about. And we were able to reach good resolutions from that, and we were able to never take a break in production. We always kept going because of that. So thank you, Isaiah, for helping us get through some tough spots in the middle there.
And I think this would be a good time, since I know, Isaiah, you need to leave in a minute. So do you have any final thoughts that you want to share, Isaiah, before we continue the conversation?
I just want to say, like, just before I wrap up, just to thank everyone, just to thank like you, Rob, and all my teammates, Emily, Braz, Devon, just for allowing me to sort of be your producer and sort of practice like what I've learned, and sort of like bring what I've learned in my previous experiences and my internships and all of that, and sort of put it all into practice. Me to stuttering because I am nervous, but yeah, thank you guys so much, and I am really, really glad that we were all able to finally work on a game together, and it was something that we all wanted to create. So yeah, thank you guys so much, and you guys are a big reason why I have this opportunity lined up for me right now. So thank you guys so much.
Oh, you're very welcome, Isaiah. And go off, have your quick lunch, because I know that we asked you to sort of condense your time. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but Isaiah is actually in the workforce already. So when we get near the end, I'll mention some of that, because there's some really fun kind of real-life success that some of our students have had, and which is really, really exciting. So thank you, Isaiah. Go off, have quick lunch. But we're going to continue the conversation.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you, with Emily and Isabelle here. So I wanted just to take a moment here to just discuss a little bit, because when I mention this team to people, like my friends and whatever, especially when they're not in the games industry, if they're in the games industry, then they're not going to question this. But if they're not in the games industry, then they'll say, well, what does a producer do? Like, what is that role, right? There's very little understanding of that. Like, if I say, well, someone's a programmer, they get that. Or even if I say someone's a designer, they might have some questions, but they kind of get it, right? Artist, obviously, they get. And so just so everyone knows, okay, what does a student producer do on a project like this? Well, Emily kind of hit it in her answer. So in any game production, especially as the team ramps up and gets a little larger and the game gets a little more complex, there's going to be a lot of spinning plates. There's going to be a lot of things that have to happen. There's going to be people that need to deliver a certain asset at a certain time. And even though this was a team of about 5 people, which is obviously a small team, we still had assets coming in from my game audio class of 7, 8, 9 people, 7 or 8 or 9 people this semester. Or there might be, I think we got a little bit of support from one of the other students for environment art, Ian Copenhaver. So yeah, there's stuff happening all the time. And then there's things like, hey, I have other classes that, I have to do. There's other things in my life, because this is not a full-time job. They're not getting paid, right? So this is something where they have to balance way, way more than, you would have to balance when you're actually working a games industry job, sort of for real. And so what someone like Isaiah does is they're clearing all the roadblocks, right? They're managing the tasks. They're laying out with something called sprints, which comes from agile development, where it's okay, for this period of time. Now, in the games industry, it would probably be about 6 weeks, but since this is a school project on a much shorter time scale, it's usually about a week or 2 or whatever. And here's what we're going to accomplish for this sprint. And someone's got to go in to the system that we use, which we use Microsoft Azure. A lot of times in the industry, people will use Atlassian products for this. So, you have job tickets or work tickets that get made, and tasks get divvied up each sprint. And then what someone like Isaiah will do is he'll look and see, well, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of tasks that aren't getting hit here, that are maybe falling behind. What can I do to facilitate that? Can I change the schedule? Can I say, okay, we're not going to focus on this aspect on this particular sprint because we don't have enough time for whatever reason. We'll work on this instead. Someone's got to orchestrate this, and it's actually a really important job and very, very critical to have someone that can do that. So I just wanted to mention that's what Isaiah did, and he did it very, very well. To kind of open discussion, Is there any other things that we wanted to bring up in terms of maybe what didn't go so well?
I think that any sort of specifics would come from, again, our team composition. And I'd say the biggest thing for me that I feel like didn't go well as someone who is making a lot of 2D assets was there kind of came a time in the semester where we realized that our player character, instead of being the Unreal mannequin, was just a photo of the character. And it was time, like Isaiah eventually mentioned, that we were never able to find a 2D animator. And so that was a lot of a large roadblock, I'd say, for the art team, and something that we sort of just had to figure out. But I think we did.
Right, and I definitely agree. And so I'm seeing a pattern here, so I think we can move on to just kind of open discussion. I think team composition, which is one of those things, by the way, for those that are listening that are curious, as a professor, we're always trying to tweak these things and make it better and find the right balance. And what ends up happening on capstone projects is this, where we don't draft students into teams together. So we're not looking at the student population and being like, okay, this person does this job and we're going to team them up with this other person that does this job. And so we're not doing that. We're allowing the teams to form on their own, which is a little bit, it's one of those things where, like, in, when you get a games industry job, it's not, quite that voluntary, right? People are looking at resumes, they're vetting people. And one of the things they're doing is saying, well, we already have people that do this. We should get another thing that we need, right? So that element is not there. And there's really, we've sort of come to the conclusion that we can't force that, because part of, the balance that a college program has to strike is, on the one hand, we want it to be realistic, just get them ready for industry, have them be totally prepped. But if it's not fun, if it's not enjoyable, if we kind of take away, and I'm passionate about this personally, I feel like if we make the projects a little bit too much like the industry, where it's, it is, I am being like the executive producer that's making you do the World War II shooter instead of the game you wanted to make, and I'm forcing you to, like, well, don't pick this person who's your good friend, pick someone else because that'll balance your team better. Well, then it's like, okay, your college is like your one shot to be, I shouldn't say your one shot, that sounds really negative, but it's kind of an opportunity to be creative and to really own something, right? And so I want to preserve that, because I think that that's an important balance. And so one of the things that we're going to try to do in the fall as one of our tweaks is we're going to allow capstone teams to hire student subcontractors. So a senior capstone team could say, okay, we're missing that programmer. I know a good sophomore or junior programmer, and we can hire them. And what are they going to get paid? Well, not money, but what they can get is potentially a internship credit if everything works out. And that's something we're going to pilot actually in the fall. It just got approved. I'm really, really excited, because that will help fill gaps like this. So again, I have to thank you for, if I don't have these experiences, I don't know what kinds of things to try to improve. So what I'm going to do now in the open discussion here is I've just been jotting down notes of things we should talk about. So one thing, you've heard Unreal mentioned a bunch. So let's talk about that. So we used Unreal, the Unreal Engine, to make this game. So any one of you can answer this. What kind of advantages and disadvantages do you think the Unreal Engine gave you in making this game?
Well, I think the biggest advantage is Unreal is what is primarily taught here at Purdue. I did take one class where I got to mess around in Unity a bit, and it's always an option, and they always encourage you to try other programs, but Unreal is pretty much the staple. So us all being students here in the computer graphics department all had some level of familiarity with it. So it was pretty much from the get-go. I think the first thing we decided on was, we are making this game in Unreal, right? And we're like, of course, that's not even a question to us. The disadvantage of it, though, is, in terms of use, Unreal's always been my favorite, but I do look at my portfolio personally, and it's like, yes, I really, really know how to use Unreal now. I've touched Unity like a handful of times, so when I'm looking at stuff, or even when I'm thinking for what type of project I'd want to do next, it always comes down to, now I have this kind of restriction. I feel that I'm not as familiar with other programs as I am with Unreal. So we really kind of tied ourselves down to this engine permanently instead of giving ourselves an opportunity to learn something else for our senior year. We kind of just went with what we are familiar with instead of branching out.
Right, yeah, and I can see that. It's kind of funny when I was in school. Now we're at this point in the games industry where multiple generations of game developers went to school for it, which is still kind of novel, actually. So for me, it was kind of funny. We worked in a number of different things. We worked in Hammer, which is Half-Life 2, which is still being kicked around, I think, for certain Valve projects. And we did the Call of Duty Radiant engine for one semester in a class, and that was kind of cool, and that was nice because Human Head was using that later, so that came in handy for me. But Unreal was, even then, kind of the primary thing, except it was Unreal 2 when I started. It was actually Unreal 2, and the story I always love to tell about this is Unreal 3 had just come out when we had started, right? We're on Unreal 4 now, for those keeping score at home. So this Unreal 3 had just come out. And it was like a revolutionary thing because Unreal 2 was still very much like, yes, other developers would license it from Epic and all that, but it was still very much the feeling of what things used to be when I was, in college and even earlier, late 90s, early 2000s, where it's like you buy a game and it came with its engine, right? And Unreal 2 sort of felt that way. You would just go buy Unreal Tournament and it would have, Unreal 2 as part of it. And that's how you got it, right? It wasn't like a separate download now. Like you do now, but like Unreal 3 had just come out, but the professors were a little bit reluctant to completely change their curriculum. And what happened was Randy Pitchford of Gearbox came and spoke to us, and because he's one of the founders of the school I went to, Southern Methodist University Guildhall, and he basically ragged on us. He's like, "What? You guys aren't using Unreal 3? That's insane." And as soon as he said that, we were poof instantly on Unreal 3, which was I'm really glad for, because the leap between Unreal 2 and 3 in visual fidelity and workflow was pretty significant, pretty large. But I didn't start using Unity until I had professional projects in Unity. We used it a lot at Human Head, and then I kind of got into a habit where I liked it, especially for doing my own little one-off indie things, my own little private projects. And so I used Unity almost exclusively at home for a couple of years there in my life. But now with, Purdue kind of flies that Unreal flag pretty high. And I think for good reason. Like you say, there are some classes that will use Unity. And it's funny, what my audience should understand is that actually Unity is a lot more popular in academia. We're a little bit weird at Purdue for emphasizing Unreal so much. And the reason is this: Unity has more stuff in it that is germane to research, and it has more stuff in it that's germane to education. Like there's actually some built-in things that Unity has that makes it easier to use, if like a LMS, learning management system, or whatever. But Unreal is the far better choice for industry. Not that, yes, there's professional games made in Unity, so it's not bad, but like Unreal is clearly the dominant game engine. So, we're trying to prepare our students for industry, and so therefore we land on Unreal. So, Isabelle, I wanted to talk to you about this sort of interesting thing that we had in the game visually. So, it's probably been a little bit confusing to our listeners because we hear 3D environments, but then we have 2D characters. So, maybe you can describe that aspect of it where we have 2D characters in 3D world and kind of how that happened.
Right. Yeah. So I think a big thing when we were starting the development of Sonata Theory was that with the team composition, we wanted to make sure that we all ended up with something from this project that we could put on our portfolio. And because Emily is a level designer, we needed a sort of 3D space, right? So that we could have a level for her to design, first of all. And all of us, mostly being 2D artists, we weren't too sure where we would fall in that, because none of us can model a character, or actually, I should fix that. Most of us cannot do that. And even then, we wouldn't have anyone to animate or rig it for us. And so our solution in this Devon, our art lead, and Emily both found a lot of packs of environment assets on the Unreal Marketplace that they could, edit the materials, use for both the real world and then the falsetto world, having a ton of environment packs of plants and things like that. And so as you play through, you're able to navigate the 3D space, using WASD. You're walking through an environment, this apartment with lots of plants hanging down, coming out at you, lots of glowy, pretty magical looking things. But where um, the 2D aspect comes in is in the NPCs and the player character. Um, so where you're walking around, you're actually a 2D character, Cadence, and you are sort of watching this walk cycle happen, uh, made up of a few frames. And so it's not exactly that you're watching her fluidly move as if you would a 3D character, but she is making the motions that she's stepping, and so it's almost mechanically like she's sort of a picture sliding, but because she's moving, it doesn't exactly look like she's sliding. Um, and then a big part of the gameplay is walking up to a character and speaking to them, whether you're speaking to them for an item specifically or a conversation battle, just getting to know them. They are just static images and full bodies of each, and um, then comes sort of like the conversation mechanics where when you speak to them, a smaller picture or a more rendered, painted portrait of them, and that's static as well, will slide in and you can get to see their face and their expressions, some of them better. And that's sort of how we tackled that 2D, 3D um, issue where we just needed both. And I think that it turned out quite well. All of the characters are designed specifically for each of their worlds. So real world clothing versus falsetto clothes are very different, very earthy tones, and lots of plants incorporated in their designs versus the real world.
Awesome, and I agree totally that it turned out great. And of course, the comparison I would immediately make, of course, is Paper Mario. It has that vibe, even though the art style isn't like that at all, really. But in terms of the 3D world with 2D character thing, it evokes that. And what I kind of found amusing about that aspect of the project is I was just thrilled. I think it looks great. Looks wonderful. I think the little walk animation, because you're not an animator, right? So I asked you to do a little walk anim that was like, what are you doing? And especially considering that you're not really an animator, I thought it looked awesome. I think maybe some of your colleagues in the department, because the class, the capstone class, they look at everyone's stuff and there's discussion. I think there's sometimes a lack of understanding that some folks might have on the give and take of a project like this, where it's like, well, yes, having a fully rigged and skinned 3D character would have been nice, but, so would be having $1 million, right?
Right, absolutely. And I think that it's definitely sort of something that kind of takes them by surprise. If Paper Mario is such a big thing and everyone sort of kind of gets the aesthetic and the world when you think of it, and to see a like a short framed animation walking through a 3D space, you sort of just have to give, like you said, a little bit more understanding to know that if my NPCs are 2D, we're probably going to have a 2D player character as well. So I did my best.
Right, and here's the thing. In my opinion, when I play the game, and because I'm your advisor, I've played the game like 1 trillion times now, and I haven't gotten sick of it. And so just so people know too, they're probably wondering, how long the game is and all that. It's about an hour long, your first time through, and people will think an hour. Well, geez, I spent 200 hours playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. Yes, trust me, an hour of content from a student team when they have other classes and it's not their full-time job is actually a really, really outstanding amount of content to make. Just so the listening audience understands, that's actually really good. A lot of the capstone projects, they end up being 15 or 20-minute demos. So the fact this really is a complete story and a nice self-contained 1 hour experience is really cool. But yeah, the thing I was getting to though is when I look at the game and I see those 2D characters in the world, it doesn't look like something that was done to cut corners or to address some glaring production lack of something, right? It actually looks intentional. Like, yes, they wanted to do this, and it looks cool that way. Like, at least that's how I interpret it. It does not look like something that was made kind of sacrificially. It looks like you just really dig that aesthetic, right? So that's, to me, a sign of success. And so one thing I wanted to pivot to, actually, let me make this point. I wanted to, because I have this hilarious piece of notebook paper that's now just so filled with things that I've been crossing off as we've gotten to them. One thing I have in the corner in a little box that I wanted to point out to the audience, because I think it's important. School is actually harder than real life for game development students, I think. I really strongly feel that way. That was true for me. I think it's true for you. Emily, I was just talking to you about how, because you're about to enter the working world as a game developer, and like how they're like, how your new employer is like, yeah, like be really careful to not have to do all-nighters and try to have work-life balance. And in school, like, it's not that way. Emily, could you kind of go into how difficult school can be for a game developer?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to talk about that. It's kind of like that thing when you're growing up and you're in 5th grade and you throw a dirty tissue at another student and you get in trouble and the teacher's like, they're not going to let this fly in middle school. That's really immature. In middle school, you do the same thing and you get in a little less trouble, but they're like, you gotta fix that before high school. You do it in high school and they just give you a little slap on the wrist and they're like, that's really immature. You're almost an adult in college. You do it in college, they don't even say anything.
Yeah, that's right.
People always warn you that the next phase of your life, it's not going to fly anymore, but I found that every next phase of my life has just gotten a little more casual and understanding. So even I got an email from someone I'll be working with, and they were like, hey, by the way, you're graduating, so take the time, enjoy your graduation, don't stress for a moment about starting with us. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. I stress over everything. But they made a point to say, you're a graduating senior, take the time, enjoy it. When my college experience has just been getting bombarded with emails about things I need to complete, things I need to finish. For game dev specifically, I will say game dev here at Purdue can tend to be a little gentler. There's some very understanding people in the department, yourself included, Rob, that are like, oh, you had something going on and it would have required an all-nighter to finish this project. Don't pull the all-nighter, get some sleep instead. But there's also that crunch of usually for these classes you have a big project that you need to finish by the end of the class. And that's a hard deadline. They're not going to extend school into the summer because you alone have a project goal that you need to push back. You have a hard deadline that you have to deliver something for. So I don't advocate for unhealthy work habits at all, but I have pulled several all-nighters. I have stressed myself out over these things because I know that there's not going to be an extension to the final thing. That's something that we kind of stressed about with Capstone last semester. I believe it was we wanted to have the demo done by then so that it could be look at all this work we've done. But the class deliverable was also we had to make this big report and this big presentation. So we weren't able to fill out the stuff for that presentation until we had the demo finished. So we actually did that all within the span of 1 week during our I think the week before finals, or it was finals week. It was probably the most stressful part of pre-production was because we had a class deadline we had to meet. Had it just been the demo alone, it would have been okay. But we had all these class requirements pushing us. And then my other classes outside of game dev, can be a little unforgiving in college. I think sometimes professors just assign things to see who will break first, whose mentality will snap. I actually just got a grade back on like an art class I'm in, and they're like, I really, really like the paper. You put a comma in a weird spot though, so I docked you like a whole letter grade. And I like wrote about D&D dice. I'm like, you don't need to know what Dungeons and Dragons is. I'm writing about the artistic connection I have to these dice. And she was like, well, I want to know what it is, so you need to explain it. Even though it wasn't the point of my paper, you run into weird things like that stress you out. And ironically, I think Isabelle here will agree, we always say the thing that gets in the way of us making games here has been the fact that we're making games here in college. College always kind of gets in the way of us bettering our college experience at the end of the day.
Yep, I totally agree. And I think that that's also just something we need to consider. When you think of college and your degree track, the electives you need to take, and, you hear about it all the time, like a random, like, and this is no, no insult to dance majors or anything, but like as someone who's coming from a CGT program, computer graphics technology, I'm a concept artist, I'm in game development. Like if my options are like dance appreciation or some like language course, it gets in the way, as interesting as they are. And the reason why I take them is because to graduate, and I'm looking for the ones that are interesting to me. Like Emily just said, she has this art appreciation course that's docking her points and taking up time, and it's adding some stress, and like she said, it gets in the way. But I think that was pretty vital to our stressful ending to Sonata Theory's, at least the course required part.
Right, and that's really fascinating because, like, I think the reason there's a bunch of different reasons why school is actually harder than being in the industry, professionally, and you both hit a lot of them, and I'll add to that as well. Like, there's something about being a student where that status, that zone you're in, never stops, right? So, it doesn't matter if it's 8 a.m., 12 noon, 1 p.m., 5 p.m., or midnight. You always feel that pressure of the projects you have to do, the homework that's due. Yes, sometimes if you're really on the money and all your homework is done for a particular period of time, every student has that wonderful Friday where they realize all their work is done and they have the weekend. That happens occasionally, but it's just never ending, and it doesn't matter how. That aspect of school is unchanging, I think. Now, I will say that at Purdue, we try, I think, pretty good to make sure that you have some level of work-life balance. The culture at schools have changed. When I was in school, it was very much a you will crunch and you'll like it, because that's going to, break you into the industry correctly. You'll understand. And now crunch culture is frowned upon, thankfully, a lot more than it was when I was in school. And so there is definitely an effort to balance things out. However, you're still going to end up pulling some all-nighters potentially and being really stressed because of the nature of a liberal arts program, which is what Purdue is, a liberal arts program. So you're going to have these other classes, you're going to have these other things that you have to do, and it's just, it's just different when you have a job. You go to that job, even if it's virtually, even if it's remote, like so many things are now. You quote unquote go to that job, and then that job is done for the day, and your free time, your private time, is, you might think about your job a little bit, but you really do put it down. You really do put it down. You go home, or you just log off of your computer, and you are done until the next time. And that really creates a very comfortable balance that school, just by its very nature, cannot provide. And so that alone makes school, I think, harder. And you bring up a lot of interesting points, too, about the amount of gen eds that you have to take. And what's kind of interesting, Guildhall, where I went, is probably the most vocational and least liberal arts like a credentialed, respected university can do, because it is a grad program, right? So it's I think we had like maybe 2 gen eds that we had to take total in the 2 years, and it was all about making games, and because it is a grad program and all that. But it was still much, much harder than being in the industry, just because of all the classes, all the balancing of all the things that are coming due and everything. So it is something I think my audience should understand. School is really challenging. But the one advantage that you both have, and I think everyone that goes to a school like Purdue has, versus like going to, something that's more vocational, where it's like, okay, we're just going to give you a certificate because, we're going to only train you in game dev stuff, no gen eds or whatever. I have to say, I've had an evolution on this. I used to think the vocational schools had the pure advantage here because, at the end of the day, you want to get the jobs, you want to get the skills to get the jobs. How can, and also the stereotype, and it's very much a stereotype that still exists, is, hey, like, we only care about what's on your portfolio, not the piece of paper. And that's still largely true. But one thing I've learned, and I've learned it recently in the last couple of years, is that even though to get maybe your first job, that's all they care about. They're just going to look at your portfolio, and they could barely care that you went to Purdue or to any other place. And I know this from talking to industry people. When they're looking for people to be managers and leads and seniors, right? When they're looking for people that could potentially become those things later, that's when the liberal arts education matters a lot more to them. And I've heard people say that specifically about Purdue. They say, hey, look, if I just want to hire an artist to crank out dinosaur toenails or whatever, lunchboxes, trash cans, whatever, just crank out art for years on end, then I'll get someone from one of the vocational schools, right? But if I want to hire someone that I feel like in maybe 5 years will be leading a team, that's when I look at a school like Purdue, because the view is that more balanced liberal arts education, which can, that type of education does take its share of knocks right now, right? People are very much like, I want to train you for a job, but there is something where people will look at a more broad-based education and be like, okay, this person can have the soft skills to work in a team, to manage other people well. And I think that has value, right? And I guess I'm now, shilling for the program I work for, but I do feel that's quite true. So one thing I wanted to ask both of you about, and Isabelle, I'll start with you, is I wanted to get into, as we kind of get closer to wrapping things up here, I wanted to talk about your individual influences as game developers and your style. So, Isabelle, what got you into game development? What games do you like to play? And kind of what are your artistic influences?
Right. That's a interesting question because I just had to think really hard. But I a large game that I've been playing since I was like 9 years old. I've been playing World of Warcraft. Super into MMORPGs and the fantasy elements of that, and the classes, the classic RPG style like mage and warrior or things like that, and that's very much what shaped my gaming experience from a very young age. And so as I continued to play these games, and I think that having and creating my own character and path, talent tree, like in World of Warcraft, or, just things like that, started to give me sort of a push to wanting to make art for them. I was a very artistic person. And so, where this is going is that I was very interested in drawing my characters and then sort of wanting to push the limits of the World of Warcraft like character creation screen, and making them my own and looking into the lore of this game, and then creating and pushing even more these characters. And I realized that what I was doing was concepting different characters in different settings of the game. And so, from some like Instagram, like, very early Instagram, early Facebook posts, I started finding that that was a career, and there were jobs where people were creating character concept art for games. And at the time, I didn't play League of Legends, but as of recently, I play it quite a lot. And I realized that all of the concept artists that I was looking up to were actually coming from Riot Games. And so once I realized, and I would say I was about 15 at that point, that I wanted to create characters, and I had already been doing that with dozens of them, in my sketchbooks, and I started doing digital art, I realized that that falls under the game development pipeline somewhere. And so that's kind of what attracted me here to Purdue with their game development and design curriculum. It was very pushed that they explored all of the fields of game development, art included, and so that's kind of what got me started here, and why I came here and why I pursue games is because I am very interested in creating and painting characters for them.
Awesome, and yeah, it's funny. One thing I'll mention to the audience is I joke around a little bit with Isabelle about League of Legends specifically, only because I used to have a South Korean exchange student that would play League constantly, and I'd hear him down there in the basement bedroom we had in Madison, Wisconsin, just like shouting all the time at it, right? And so it kind of became like the bane of my existence. For a little while, and so I'm always joking around. Oh, League, come on! But no, it's really cool to hear kind of your influences that go, from earlier MMOs like World of Warcraft, and kind of what led you eventually to Purdue. Now, Emily, same question. Sort of your influences, what got you into game development, and so forth.
Yeah, so growing up, I always kind of grew up on Nintendo games. I'm very much a Nintendo console player, and then in high school that would expand to the PlayStation, and then around that time is when my dad got an Xbox, so I do have exposure to that as well. I got the PlayStation because I was like, hey, these games like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy look pretty okay. They look interesting, and now I'm tragically addicted to those games. But yeah, I grew up a console player, and it was always weird because the rest of my family, whenever they play a game, it's always just very to the point. They're like, okay, I'm here at the start. What's the end goal? I'm just going to go straight there. No exploration, no thinking about like, what else could I do? Like my mom always says, whenever someone does take the time to explore, she's like, just play the game, and my sister, whenever like something's not made very obvious to her, she's like, well, this game just sucks, and puts it down. So I'm kind of like the only one in my family that would take my time to explore not just open worlds, but just anything in video games. Like I was that person that would open up a Mario Kart game and go into time trials, but I would just drive around really slowly and park my cart at like the edges of the map and kind of wonder, how did they create this? What if this was a whole world that you could live in? Like, what if you could live here in dry desert? It would be horrible, but what if you could? And I never really got it growing up. I just thought, well, maybe I'm weird. I'm sure no one making these games wants people to just sit and stare at this stuff. But when I came to Purdue for game dev, I started to realize the further I got into the major, like these ideas of mine from childhood kept popping up of maybe they do want me to like sit back and take in the environment and think about the possibilities of what I could do next. Part of that was influenced because, again, this team is very art heavy, and they're also my friend group. So all my friends were going down the art path, and then when I couldn't follow them because my hands are way too shaky to sketch anything to save my life. So when I couldn't follow them down that path, I kind of felt really lost for a bit. I also wasn't good at programming. So I started to just default and go into the designer position. Early on into the degree, there were people that told me, why would we don't really specialize in design here, so, that's kind of on you. You'd be smarter to just be a generalist, would even be a better option for you. But when I took the level design class here, that's when it kind of all clicked, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to be doing. There's finally, I didn't know what the title for what I wanted to do was, but level design, and then later I would kind of scope like back and dial it back to just game design in general. That's what I want to pursue. So it was kind of like a huge relief to wash over me that finally I found the area that I had been looking for, because as a kid, that was what I was doing. I was thinking about how each level was constructed and what I would do and any changes I would make to the level. I didn't realize it because I was just a bored kid and I was just messing around. Never even knew what a game engine was at that point. But yeah, it just kind of had always been there. I paid for college basically to find out what is it? What is this position called?
So yeah, I definitely want to comment on this because this actually dovetails a lot to my Purdue experience since taking the Purdue job, which started in fall of 2019. So here I am. It's fall of 2019. I'm a brand new professor at Purdue, and I am brought on board. You remember in Emily's answer, she talked about how people were telling her, well, we don't necessarily teach this here, so good luck, right? Well, they hired me to teach this, right? So that was the kind of the good thing that happened here. So I arrive and I'm given a class right away, and I remember Professor Whittinghill, who runs the game major, telling me, okay, this class is yours to do your level design stuff with. Just go do it, right? So this would be CGT 345 is what it's called, and so I remember going in there, and fortunately, I had already taught a little bit before at one of those more vocational schools in Madison. It's actually out of business now. So I had developed a little bit of curriculum, which really helped because, one of the things that you're just not prepared for as a new professor is just how much work it is to make the course content, because it's not in game dev, especially because it's not like, I'm sure there are other subjects where you're just kind of handed a book and handed some lesson plans and you just riff off of that and it's fine. But so often in game dev education, you are making the curriculum from scratch. Like every class you take over is just you're making the thing. So fortunately for this, I had some curriculum already. I still had to make a lot of it though, because at the vocational school, I was really getting people that were starting from zero, had never opened a game engine before, could, in some cases that, turning on a computer was sort of what their skill set was by the time I got them, right? So I had to spend a lot of time, well, here's how you, place a thing, and here's what the, keyboard hotkeys are and all that. Fortunately, you were all juniors, so I didn't need to do that, right? So I had to make a lot of new curriculum to balance where you were in your journey, but I at least had some notion of what I was going to teach. So anyway, I'm teaching this class. It's my first class. And I just see Emily back there smiling away with Isaiah. Actually, Isabelle wasn't in that class, but Isaiah was. And for some reason, I always remember you having the Dunkin' Donuts coffee, probably because I love Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And I'm teaching the stuff, and you're always wondering, like, am I getting through to students at all? Like, do they just think I'm a big dumb dork? Like, what do they think of all this, right? And a couple of things happened that really told me, hey, this is the right path for me. I'm doing an okay job at this. And one was just like getting back the assignments that I would pass out to you all. And I just remember reading your documentation, especially. And by the way, for those that don't know, designer, being a level designer or a game designer, they're all kind of similar positions. Generally, how it works in the video game industry is you don't start out as a game designer in the sense that most people think of what a game designer is. You usually start out as a level designer or a mission scripter or some kind of sub-discipline of that. It can be called game designer. Companies are all different, but you're not designing the whole game, usually as an entry level. So I tend to focus on the things that a designer would typically do that are kind of below making the whole game's design, right? So anyway, I have these assignments out, and I get back, and part of it is the documentation. I kind of lost track of the point I was trying to make there. There's a lot of writing, a lot of documenting, a lot of, just written communication that you have to do as part of any kind of game design role. And so in my class, there's a lot of documents that get written for a grade that get sent to me. And when I read Emily's documents, it was just like, yes, this is obviously a student that is well suited for this. I could just tell that immediately. You're an excellent writer. That was the first thing. And that's like a must for any kind of design role. You have to be a good writer, both from a creative level and also from a mechanical level, a grammatical level. And so you're an excellent writer. And also just the things you would choose to write about in your designs, the type of designs you were making, really just kind of spoke to me, because we have, kind of similar tastes in some ways. We both like interesting world building, kind of character exposition dialogue. We both kind of like to explore the game worlds. You talked about Mario Kart and kind of parking and looking. I derive a lot of satisfaction from games that are very comfortable to explore in. I do like action and engaging in game systems and all that stuff, but if it's only that, I can't get into it, right? I have to have a world, in preferably a 3D world even, that I could just kind of imbibe in and vibe in and explore, and you were just kind of similar. And so I would get these documents back, and also you were doing things that I found a lot of fun, which you really like to do slice of life stuff. It is one of the things I remember from your classwork, where you'd be like, this game takes place in a grocery store, this game is about a children's educational game gone wrong, or whatever, as opposed to like, I do get a lot of projects, and there's nothing wrong with this, obviously. I like my students to be free to create, but you do get a lot of like, here's ninjas and zombies, here's, sword and board, sort of, fighting things, like, just the things you would typically expect. And your projects were never like that. They were never just the typical things you would get. They're always like, here's like an interesting little thing that, and they always felt so personal too, right? Like, which I really liked. And so that was really cool. But the other thing is, I had asked for, you all in my class to make some comments or something. There's the official evals or whatever, right, that college makes students do. But I had a thing where I'm just like, just send me what you think of the class, right? And you wrote me such a nice comment. And it was, I'm not going to remember it exactly or whatever. I have it saved, actually. That's how much it meant to me personally. But, I remember it saying in essence was, I didn't know what I wanted to do until I took this class, and now I do. And I'm just like, yes, this is my purpose. This is why I'm here. Yes, it's amazing to make a game and entertain even a few million people, as I've done in my life. But to like substantively change, an individual's life in a huge way like that, where you're now on a career path and everything, that felt great. So, it was really fun to come here and to help students like yourself have that, level of success. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, and remains a lot of fun. So one thing I want to do real quick, since I'm kind of on this topic anyway, just real fast as we're getting real close to the end here, I do just want to give props to some of you all that have, gotten jobs even before graduation, which is better than I did. I got my first job like a few days after graduation. A lot of my colleagues, it took them a long, long time, and that's still going to be true for some of you, of course. It's always challenging to get the first job. But Emily, you are about to start at Lost Boys Interactive, right? It's Lost Boys, is it Interactive? I'm now blanking.
Yeah, it's Lost Boys Interactive.
Yeah, and that's really exciting. That's a great studio in Madison. They have a satellite branch in Austin now. I know Tim Gerritsen up there, great guy. Amber Hardy's one of their environment artists, great. Actually one of my students from the vocational school, Madison Media Institute. So that's really exciting. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And by the way, I'll say, and it's hard not to get, a little misty-eyed, a little, you're the first level designer I've taught that has to my knowledge, achieved that, right? Because there are lots of people that were totally capable, totally capable, definitely have the talent, but, at a vocational school, they don't get the 4 years, and it's always kind of challenging here. And it's one of the things that led me to Purdue is I knew there was the structure here. And even though you didn't maybe find your thing until junior year, you had still built up fundamentals that already put you farther ahead. And so just to see that work out that way was awesome. And of course, Isaiah Eleazar, who was with us before and had to leave, he's already working for Vicarious Visions. So he's already in his job. So that's really, really exciting. We can, of course, do a lot better at Purdue, and we're working hard to do better and better and better with that aspect of it. But we are seeing more and more success as the years go on, and obviously everyone else that's still out there, you'll definitely find your way, no question. So one last thing I wanted to ask, and it's a super important thing, but and it's in my notes, but I'm just getting to it now. So Sonata Theory, where can interested parties find Sonata Theory?
Sonata Theory. Right now we do have a demo up on our website, which I don't know if you could hook up a link somewhere.
I'll put it in the show notes, the description,
so there's a link to our website, and that's where you could play an updated demo of the first chapter, so to speak, of the game, but the full version will be releasing on Steam for free. We are hoping by the end of this month. Right now we're just in the final stages of polishing and debugging, so we should have an official release date very soon once that's all wrapped up. But yeah, very soon, I promise, is when the official release will be, and I'm sure we're all going to be hyping it up and talking about it as soon as we have a Steam page up and everything ready to go for advertising.
And I'll put a link in the show notes, but there is a MAYJ Studios website. It's a Weebly website, so I'll have that in the notes. Is there any other social media that you all have that I'm not aware of?
I just use Twitter.
Right, and so actually, where can folks find you on Twitter?
Oh, actually, I would need to look at that. I'm not sure what my handle is. Sorry,
right.
1 second.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So let me just say real quick while Isabelle's looking that up. So by the time this podcast hits the airwaves, it'll be a couple of weeks from now, because I always try to record these in advance, sometimes months in advance, although for this it's not going to be months in advance. So it's possible that by the time you're listening to this later on in May, that it might be on Steam already. So definitely look. But if not, keep checking. I have no idea. Okay, so do we have some Twitter accounts that folks can look up?
Yeah. So you can follow me at Belle, that's BELLE, Pepper _03.
Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. Emily, you're on Twitter as well, I believe.
Yeah. 9.
And of course, on my end, you cut out exactly when you were starting to say that Twitter handle.
Perfect. So yeah, the Twitter handle is EKHill99.
Okay, and I'll put that in the notes as well. And so that would be the most logical place, other than the website, for news about the game. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening. So again, the game is Sonata Theory, a really fun, really comfy, that's the one sense all the playtests I've made. It's just a fun world to walk around in, talk to characters, find where you can get the milk, frustrate yourself over how to melt ice cream. That was one of the things that took me a while to figure out, is how to melt ice cream into milk. But there, it's got really fun, light environment puzzle stuff, lots of cool dialogue. Dialogue's very charming. Characters are all quite charming. Lots of good voice acting in the game that was provided by my audio class, sort of in the anime grunt style, which is sort of a style where instead of reading the dialogue, literally it's sort of canned greets and canned negative and positive reacts, but it really does a great job making the world feel alive. Obviously, the music I made for it, great art direction. It's a cool game, folks. Check it out, Sonata Theory. Check the show notes for the website. All right, so until next time, I will see you all, or rather talk at you all later. Bye-bye.